Gentlemen, this air intelligence briefing is secret. We've analyzed the Soviet guided missile test program in great depth. The Soviet missile development program reveals that it introduces a new dimension to surprise and forces us to reassess our own strategic position and reevaluate the Soviets' ability to deal a crippling blow.
It's the year 1966, and U.S. military planes are soaring through the skies over a peaceful coastal village in southern Spain. But suddenly, disaster strikes. The two planes come crashing down, sending debris raining down on the unsuspecting villagers below. But they aren't just any ordinary aircraft. One plane carries 4 megaton hydrogen bombs, each 100 times more potent than the atomic bomb that devastated Hiroshima. A destructive force so immense it could inflict irreparable harm on much of Spain, causing a radioactive shadow for generations to come. While the wreckage and debris scatter across the village, the residents have no idea what danger is lurking around them. The two planes are part of Operation Chrome Dome, a top-secret Cold War security mission. Join me as we dive deep into the events that unfolded after the crash and discover how close the world came to a nuclear disaster. The Cold War era witnessed an intense arms race between the US and Soviet Union. It was a battle for supremacy, and the stakes were higher than ever before. In 1957, the Soviet Union shook the world by launching the first intercontinental ballistic missile, flying over 3,700 miles in less than an hour. This was bad news for the US, who were still using bomber aircraft to drop nuclear weapons from the air. It meant they had a longer response time, taking several hours to retaliate. But the Americans were not about to let the Soviets win the race to nuclear dominance. The top-secret Operation Chrome Dome was a mission falling under the Strategic Air Command, where up to 12 B-52 bomber aircraft armed with thermonuclear missiles remained airborne around the clock for 8 years from 1961 to 1968. The idea was simple: keep the fully armed bombers in the sky to ensure a swift retaliatory strike, even if the Soviet Union were to damage U.S. airfields first. The strike-ready B-52s had an astonishing range of up to 10,000 miles without refueling, and could stay airborne for extended periods with its aerial refueling capabilities. Operating on 3 strategic flight paths, these missions were not for the faint-hearted. One flew across the Pacific from Alaska towards Japan, another over Greenland, and the third flew east across Spain into the Mediterranean. These flights were taking about 24 hours and multiple aerial refuelings, which, despite being a regular occurrence, was still a high-stakes operation requiring great precision and skill. The KC-135A refueled receiver aircraft like the B-52 while in flight, using a boom. Amidst a refueling mission, the B-52, soaring at 31,000 feet, approached the flying gas tanker. But something went horribly wrong. The bomber was traveling too fast and smashed into the tanker's fueling boom, triggering an explosion that engulfed the plane in flames. And that was just the start of the mission's ordeal. The B-52's unarmed thermonuclear payload, 4 massive 1.5 megaton bombs, was released from the bomber's hold as the B-52 broke apart. Although the bombs were fitted with parachutes, only 2 of the 4 opened. The non-nuclear explosives in the other 2 weapons detonated upon impact with the ground, creating house-sized craters. The blast spewed highly toxic plutonium dust over a vast area of homes, tomato farms, and forests. The 3rd bomb landed intact, half buried in a dry riverbed. The 4th bomb, however, would only be found more than 2 months later. Within hours, the fishing village of Palomares would become the center of a global spotlight. Over 2,000 troops were deployed for a massive cleanup operation called Moist Mop. Shockingly, they worked for several weeks without protective gear, using only regular fatigues. They dug up the contaminated soil and shipped it in steel drums to a secure disposal facility in the U.S. Meanwhile, brushes, trees, and houses were washed down with high-pressure water and detergents, while multiple layers of paint were applied to building exteriors to stop radioactive particles from resuspending in the air. Troops also burnt expansive contaminated crops, which is dangerous because inhaling plutonium dust can cause lung tissue cells to die off, leading to lung disease and cancer. Declassified reports show that over 6 pounds of plutonium were released during the incident. This amount significantly raised health concerns for Palomares veterans. Additionally, the Air Force bought truckloads of contaminated tomatoes to prove they were safe to eat, despite the health threats related to consuming contaminated food. The hunt for the fourth bomb was still underway, and the United States was anxious to find it before any enemies in the vicinity could lay claim to it. Then it took a dramatic turn when eyewitnesses reported seeing a parachute plummet into the Mediterranean waters. But where exactly did the bomb land? The search was a colossal undertaking involving 30 ships and a submersible vessel. The price tag for the sea search alone topped $10 million, making it the most expensive salvage operation at the time. Despite experts' efforts to calculate the bomb's location, the potential impact zone was still too vast to search effectively. That was until a local fisherman came forward with a critical piece of information. His eyewitness account led the team to a 1-mile radius of where he saw the parachute go down, and hope was reignited. On March 15th, the Navy submersible finally located the bomb, lying at a depth of 2,500 feet. However, recovery efforts were hampered by technical challenges, and it would be more than 80 days before the bomb could safely be brought to the surface. Amazingly, the bomb appeared to be mostly intact, despite spending over 11 weeks underwater. Although it had suffered some damage, including a large dent in the nose and 2 tears in the tail, the most critical component, the switch, remained safely in the off position. After the Palomares incident, about 500 claims linked to residents' loss of income and injuries were settled by the U.S. However, declassified documents show that the U.S. contributed less than 15% of the promised funding for a public health program to monitor the long-term effects of radiation. Veterans involved in the cleaning up of Palomares reportedly developed cancers due to plutonium exposure. But the Department of Veterans Affairs repeatedly rejected their claims based on inaccurate estimates of radiation exposure compiled by the Air Force. The lawsuits emanating from the cleanup operations were dismissed due to federal law protecting the military from negligence claims. Most of the plaintiffs have since died from cancer. In August 2022, however, President Joe Biden signed the Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act to improve veterans' access to health care related to toxic exposure. To this day, the haunting legacy of contamination grips Palomares. Soil tests in the 1990s showed over 65,000 cubic yards remained contaminated, with undetected areas reportedly indicating radiation levels 20 times the permissible level for populated areas. It's been more than a decade since the U.S. agreed to clean up the remaining plutonium, but a timeline has not been announced. Sadly, Palomares remains the most radioactive town in Europe, with about 1/5 of the plutonium still contaminating the area. Watch this episode next if you found this video interesting. Please add a like and leave a comment if you want to support the channel.